I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Inside Show. I'm honored to have with me someone who I consider a friend, and someone who I believe is the most courageous patriot I've ever come in contact with in my very old and long life, General Michael Flynn. You know, there are a select few who obtain the rank of general, but there are even fewer who have obtained the rank of the people's general. George Washington in the Revolutionary time period. Smedley Butler in the World War I time period. General George Patton in the World War II time period. Storeman Norman Schwarzkopf in the Gulf War time period. And now we are yet in another time of war that was brought upon us by an entity called the Deep State that has infiltrated our country, our government, business, education system, the world. And the war right now is on our own shores. And the people's general in this time period is my friend, General Michael Flynn. For those of you not familiar with General Flynn, a little background. He honorably served our country over 33 years in the United States Army. He served at every level of intelligence command and staff, culminating his assignment as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. After his retirement from the military, General Mike was appointed by President Trump as the National Security Advisor. And as you all know, he was targeted, framed, and not prosecuted, persecuted. Let's get it right. Persecuted by the Deep State over the ensuing 4 years. But in the end, the people's general, Mike Flynn, was exonerated by the Department of Justice. General Mike is now back on the battlefield and leading the people versus the Deep State's war on America and on our freedoms. You know, General Flynn, you, as I mentioned, were targeted, you were framed, you were persecuted by the Deep State, and yet you not only survived, but you defeated the enemy due to your strength of character and your strength of family. I want to start with your family. You are the product of Charlie and Helen Flynn. The most important lesson you learned from your parents.
My father taught us to always treat others like you want to be treated, and my mother was an extraordinary educator and teacher. And those two principles, those two values that were instilled in all of us, have lived through all of my siblings, all of our children, and definitely, as I think about my mom and dad, which is very emotional for me, and I know for all of my brothers and sisters, because they were just bedrocks of American values, treating others like you want to be treated, and see the best in people. Was really my father's main objective for all of us as he taught us. And then my mother was just this incredibly talented, creative, smart, sophisticated woman who instilled in us that no matter what, you're going to get an education and you're going to continue to educate yourself and never stop learning.
Both parents, remarkable. Your mom, at the time period, here she was, helping raise a truckload of kids, right, who were, of course, all angelic and never a problem. But in addition, she pushed education and actually was the role model for all of you on education. In the time period she did this, she ended up going to law school, didn't she?
She did, and she graduated from law school. After raising 9 kids, she graduated from law school roughly at the age of 69 years old. It was a lifelong dream of hers, but she first wanted to make sure that she raised a tight-knit, strong family, and she did that.
Let's talk about the tight-knit family. Your brothers and sisters. The most important lesson learned from your brothers and sisters.
Your family is probably the one entity, for those that have families, those that have the opportunity, the privilege to be part of a family that is tight-knit, And I just explained it to people like, we might argue internally in the Flynn family, and we do. We have, I mean, when you talk about sitting around the kitchen table and debating the world, politics, everything, the military, the foreign policy. I mean, you'll get a sophisticated conversation, and it'll be a hot, hot debate, and we will fight like the dickens with each other. But if you attack the soul of our core of who we are as a family, like my mother used to use the phrase, woe betide you. And that's part of why I'm sitting here talking to you today, Dave, who you've been extraordinary in support and stood strong in our corner and stood strong with our family. And so we now like to say, fight like a Flynn, because there are many who have done that for us. And when you're brought into the Flynn fold, you will find loyalty and strength and commitment if you're a good person. If you're a good person.
I spoke to some of your brothers and sisters, and I asked them the same question. What have you learned from your brother Mike? Want to hear what they said? Here you go.
I'm not so sure.
Oh, no. Here's what they said. It's interesting. Perseverance. Strength of character. No matter what, never falling, no matter what's thrown at you, never falling into despair. To be humble like Mike. Mentally tough. Determined to never lose. To be a leader. And here's what they all said. All of us, from the very beginning, always wanted to follow Mike. He was always the leader of all the kids.
Oh.
And then I asked them, what were the major components of your brother's life that you think had a huge force upon him? Here's what they said. His parents, his wife Lori, and the University of Rhode Island ROTC program. Let's talk about Lori, your wife. You've been together since I think you were, 13 years old?
Right. We always kid about ourselves. Lori and I have a great story about that. But I was, working at a beach with her brother, and I was always a good swimmer as a lifeguard and beach boy and all that kind of stuff at a local town beach here. And so through that relationship with her brother, I met, and then we, like kids do, you have puppy love or whatever you want to call it. I always knew that over the next sort of couple of years that you always had that feeling about someone, and we kid ourselves now, we laugh about it, and she always had that feeling about me. And then we even before we got out of high school, we basically latched up, and the rest is history. And she has been by my side, and I tell people, don't get in the way of my wife, because she's tougher than nails, and but she's also incredibly kind. I'm from in my neighborhood or my hometown. I'm sort of from the Irish side, and Lori grew up in a very strong knit, very faithful based Portuguese community, and so I would just say that we were able to bring communities together through that, and there's a whole bunch of stories that would take 5 shows, 10 shows to talk about just that period of time when we met. But that's really, she has been the rock. And there's a place actually when we were married, during our marriage, during our wedding day, our cousin Philip married us, and where the beach where I worked and where we sort of met through. There's a place on the beach that has a rock on it, a big rock. I mean, it's a big one. And we call it the Rock. And it's a place where we would go surfing as kids. And the waves, the tide comes in, splashes off the rock, and it goes back out. The sand sort of shapes back and forth, but the rock stays steady because it's a giant rock, and it sort of creates the formation of the waves. It creates the formation of the beach. And during our wedding, my cousin Philip, who knew of that beach, and he's been visiting us many times over the years, he used that metaphor to describe Lori and I, really at the time when we were very, very young people getting married. And he said Lori was that rock. Mm-hmm. And, in a way, I was sort of the waves coming in and out, the sand shaping, and that rock stayed steady throughout at that moment. It's funny that here I am, 4 decades later talking about it, but that is such a perfect metaphor for who Lori has been, was and is in our relationship. She's that steady rock that doesn't move and is strong and helps to shape the tide as it comes in and out based on really a military career that was really where we had many, many separations and many sacrifices and raising kids and all the things that come with a military spouse. And Lori would be the first one to tell you that don't pretend like she's end all be all, because she would be the first one to say, don't ever forget the young wives who sent their husbands off to war and they never returned. Mm-hmm. She's very, and that's very emotional for me, and I know it's very emotional for her, because she's been that rock, and people who have known her see her just like I just described to you, Dave. Mm-hmm. I mean, just like I described to you, she is the foundation upon which we have been able to have a really successful and happy relationship. And like I tell young people these days who are getting ready to go off to be married, and they say, well, what? How come you guys have been married for so long? And I say, it's hard work. Marriage is hard work. It's not all bliss, but there's a lot of fun when you grow up together. Mm-hmm. And both of us, excuse me, emotional. Both of us would also say that, we're humans. We're imperfect, and mm-hmm. but we know together we work through the struggles of life, and I just we've enjoyed a really, really strong, happy relationship, and we're thankful to our faith, and we're definitely thankful to our extended families, both mine, who you've met, mm-hmm. and Lori's, mm-hmm. who that's another extraordinary story of a great family.
General Flynn, one of the main components of your life, one of the main rocks of your life, has been your military career. Mm-hmm. What are some of the major lessons that you learned having been in the military?
Well, first I would tell you, as a young kid, I think I grew up in the part of my family where I was able to enjoy some of my father's career as a sergeant at the end of his career, and I think that as a kid growing up, I ended up feeling like, wow, I really, this is what I really wanted to do. So I think over a career, mm-hmm. the number one thing is the people that you meet, mm-hmm. and the extraordinary people that you meet. And I would say that through this crucible that my family has been put through over these last 4 years, mm-hmm. the people that have drawn to me and kept me, really strong in terms of what I call true friends and true friendships, have been the non-commissioned officers that I had in various moments in my career. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that know me the best, because they spent time with me, they lived with me, they breathed with me, they slept with me, we fought together, mm-hmm. We trained together, and that goes back to who I'm still in touch with today, and have reached out to me constantly through this to say, we're with you, don't worry about it, this is, things are going to be okay. And that goes back to when I was a lieutenant and my platoon sergeant, my first sergeants, my sergeants majors. So those people, to me, and that maybe I'm a product of what my father taught me, because he was a non-commissioned officer, a mm-hmm. World War II and Korea vet, mm-hmm. that those are the people that are really the foundation of our military institution, and in some cases they're not just Army sergeants or Army sergeants majors, but they're also Navy chiefs,
right,
who I had that worked with me over the years, or Air Force senior tech sergeants who were superb. So people, and then I think the other big sort of in general is just the leadership and the education that I was able to be privileged to receive in my 33 plus year career, and the leadership and the education, and then the experiences. Education is not just sitting down, going to school and getting a master's degree or getting some other degree. Education is every single day you learn about human beings. You learn about the people in your organization. So that the people, and then the leadership experiences, education, and training that I received, I think have allowed me to understand the sort of bigger, the human geography that exists in our world, and the geostrategic challenges and issues that our country has been dealing with in our history, and then is dealing with right now.
General Flynn, your extraordinary military career led to you being named, as I mentioned in your introduction, Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and then President Trump's National Security Advisor. It's my understanding, I have this under good authority, that when President-elect Trump, for the first time, at least in the Oval Office, had a meeting with Obama told him to be careful of two particular people. One was Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, and the second person was you. Now, why exactly did Obama say that? What was the, I'm not sure even rationale, but what was the background on that? Because that's so off the rails.
I mean, you're right, and no one has ever asked Barack Obama that question. No one. I'm not sure if they'll ever ask him. I don't think he'll ever give an honest answer. But that dot, okay, so that dot in the or that piece of this mosaic puzzle, this million-piece puzzle that has been put together, Dave, and actually you have, through you and through others like you, that and I call them this sort of digital network of people that have put this million-piece puzzle together, and it's not complete yet, because there's some other corners and middle pieces that have to be done that have to do with accountability, as you know. But why would Barack Obama be so threatened to mention me alongside dear leader Kim Jong-un, right? Who's a,
right.
I mean, everybody's got an opinion about him, but why? And I will say that for another time, because I do believe that there's an accountability that must occur. It has to occur. If it doesn't, our country is not going to be a country. That it has to do, I believe, with what you and I talked about. I think before we started, it has to do with the blunt truth of what his administration was doing publicly, and then what his administration got caught doing over time. Because if you know, I mean, so in a way they sort of looked at and knew that I was probably, because at that meeting, I'm probably going to be designated in some role, right?
Right.
So and I think it was the next day or the day after. I'd have to go back and look at a calendar, but I'm designated as the National Security Advisor. So that, I guarantee you, scared the hell out of them. And because the National Security Advisor's roles and responsibilities they come through, or everything comes through that pinnacle. And especially some of these big issues that we have discovered in the discovery of all this, like I wrote in my statement, in my personal statement to the world that this was a coup. This was a coup. It may have been a soft coup, but it was a coup, and there's no two ways about it. And we're still experiencing it, Dave. So I'll lay out an analysis at some point in time that really talks to these issues. But you're right. It's like, I've been sort of treated. I mean, and look at where all you got to do is dig in, like people have done, Dave. And these people were treating me like I was public enemy number one. After he and one last. I'm sorry, Dave.
No, go ahead.
He appointed me twice to very, very senior intelligence community leadership positions. Twice I was United States Senate confirmed twice. So when they do that, I mean, they're digging into your background. They know, it's like my conversation with the President of the United States the other day. He said, we joked about it because it's serious, and we talked about the seriousness of it.
Yes.
But we also we laughed about it because he says, you're probably the cleanest guy in the world. And yet, here we have to do this thing. We have to do this. I have to do this pardon thing because it just doesn't look like it's going to end for you. And I said, as much as I would want to fight through it, I can't allow my family to continue to do this. I can't put them through this. So I told him, I thanked him very much. But I said to him, Mr. President, I said, there's one other person that's cleaner than me, and that's you. And that's you, And I always tell him, I used to introduce him as the most imperfect guy you're ever going to meet that's going to be the next president of the United States. We, American people, Dave, and I'm, again, I can get emotional but I'm also very serious about this. The American people do not seek perfection. They seek honesty.
That's right.
They seek leadership.
Yes.
They seek people that are willing to fight through something, right? I mean, don't give up. So, and don't pretend like you're something else. And so, when back to your question about why Obama did that, I would say to him, so why? I think I know why. I'll analyze it and I'll lay that out in the future. But to me, he in a way pretended to be something other than what he really is.
Oh, that's for sure. And
so here we are today in this situation that we're facing, and I think the American people, I know the American people see through it all. They see through all of this, and they're upset.
Oh, they're very upset, and they've awakened.
Right.
They've awakened to the truth and the facts, and I believe what you went through and your family went through led to a lot of that awakening. General Flynn, if as an outsider someone asked me why was General Flynn put in that category with Kim Jong-un, it's because of your answer you just gave. It's because you're clean. They can't stand, they fear, they despise people who are clean because they, in fact, are so dirty. I want to talk about a couple other dirty people that targeted you. Former director of the CIA, John Brennan. Former director of national intelligence, James Clapper. Former director of the FBI, James Comey. Former director of the FBI, Robert Mueller. Tell me if I'm wrong. I believe they targeted you because you're clean.
You've only started the list, Dave.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few others that I'd add to it. And again, you say to yourself, why? Why? So for the American people and those that listen to this, and this, I know that, your show gets a lot of other reviews because as the internet does so well, it pushes around messages that people are looking for. And your message is something that people look for. And your message through your own conversations with your audiences and your messages through your conversations with people such as myself, the American people they get it. They understand. And you cannot, you can the old phrase about fooling people once, fool me once, right?
Right.
But don't try to fool me again.
Yeah.
And there's haters out there, and you just can't be, you can't worry about that.
No.
My mother used to say, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And so, back to what I said about fight like a Flynn. So those individuals who jumped out on television after they testified under oath, and now I have a lot to say about that, about the testifying under oath, and to the Republican side of our aisle, right, in our political aisle.
Right.
But all these people testified under oath, and then they went out on national television to millions and millions of people and said, these guys committed treason, they're treasonous, they sedition, all these names, all these horrible traitor, right? Traitor. I mean, they used all these horrible things, but yet when they were under oath, when the sort of rubber meets the road, they said they had to tell the truth, because otherwise they'd be up the river, right?
That's right.
So, but then they did that. Why did they do that? Why they did that, Dave? And we're feeling it now. They did that because there was a phrase made by someone in the past, in a fairly recent past, not within the last couple of years, but probably within the last decade, that talked about, we are going to fundamentally change America. Well, that phrase that was stated is part and parcel to the kinds of things and the kinds of statements that not only people like those that you mentioned said it to large audiences of people, but also the media, right? The media continued to parrot those. And then they just, through repetition, through propaganda, repetition, they repeated it and repeated it and repeated it, to the point where people begin to believe, that are listening, because they don't have access to other cable channels. They don't listen to guys like you. There's a voice out there that they're not hearing.
Right.
And they turn on, NBC every night, and that's what they see, or they turn on CNN or some of these really left-wing organizations who are people don't believe anymore, and that's all they get, and they go, oh my God, this guy, this Trump guy, this Flynn guy, right? And now we know from a senior, and this is public, in late October timeframe, when the statement came out, his under oath statement came out, a senior FBI agent who was in the 2016 campaign FBI, right? And he was in part of the spying, quote unquote spying. He was part of the transition. He was part of the campaign FBI, right? And then he got into not campaign, but in the White House FBI. And then he was part of the Mueller investigation. In this October 2020, almost 4 years later, he finally, for various reasons, comes forward, and I think his testimony is about 8 pages, and he basically says the whole effort was to get Flynn to get Trump.
That's right.
Bill Barnett is the agent's name. You can look him up, and you can look up the 302, right? And it was, quote unquote, what everybody's gotten to know, exculpatory evidence, right? That was withheld from me, that by the grace of God, and Sidney Powell, she fought for that. So I give that example, Dave, because it's all part of this fundamental shift, this fundamental change of our country that I see, I believe that the American public sees, and many, many millions of Americans they're concerned. They're concerned. I mean, and I could use other stronger words, like they're in fear of it, or they're afraid of it. But I think we have to be fearless. American patriots have to be fearless right now, and fight back through our political leaders, not up in Washington D.C., because Washington D.C. is broken. They have to fight back through our constitutional process. And our constitutional process, I mean, I've studied our history and I've studied our Constitution and I've studied the founding fathers, what they were thinking. If you read some of like John Locke, you read some of the founding fathers, right, who were signatories, what they talked about and what derived our Constitution, like 75% of them would tell you the derivation toward the Constitution, where they got their ideas came from the Bible. Mm-hmm. And they put things in there to make sure that we didn't, because they knew tyranny. If there was people that knew tyranny, it was our founding fathers. And they always worried, and they've always said, and there's many, many examples, that it wasn't going to be an external enemy that was ever going to defeat us as long as we stayed together, unified as a nation, unified as patriots. We could fight anybody. Hell, we beat the British at the time, right? Mm-hmm. George Washington lost 90% of his battles, mm-hmm. but he won the most important one, right?
He did.
And so, very, very important. You go to Abraham Lincoln. I mean, the war was lost. I mean, the Civil War was a tough time, but he overcame because he had, even though everybody hated him, there's a lot of people in the North that hated Lincoln. They didn't, people don't even know that. So all these things, our founders realized that this was a potential. And here we are. Mm-hmm. Here we are. And we've gone through these periods, but this is going to be a test of the fiber and the DNA of the American people in the coming days and the coming weeks. The very fiber of the American people is being tested mm-hmm. in this moment in history, and we will either be able to write a positive outcome because we correct ourselves and we overcome this burden that mm-hmm. we are all wearing. We are all wearing it, mm-hmm. not just the Republicans who voted for Trump, but this is an American burden. And so anyway, that's a long answer that I try to describe sort of what happened in history, where we were as a country, mm-hmm. where we have traveled, this journey that we have traveled to this point in our American life, and then where we are today. And I really, I'm concerned. But the one thing I have trusted, and I'll shut up in a second.
Go right ahead. No, you're fine.
Let's get back to your show. The one thing that I do believe is I believe in the American people. Mm-hmm. I believe in the American people. I believe in the American spirit.
Well, and that's been so readily apparent of late, General Flynn, and here's why. If you look at these hearings that occurred in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, Georgia, it's the American people who are standing up and saying, no, this is not right. And I believe one of the reasons why, I said this to someone the other day, 5 years ago, I'm not sure I would believe that the American people would stand up this way, that the way they're standing up now, for the Constitution, for freedom, for liberty, against these totalitarian thugs. But I believe because of watching Donald Trump fight, watching you fight, your family fight, the great Sidney Powell fight, I believe that has motivated and inspired millions of Americans, not just to come out and vote on November 3rd. And we all know Donald Trump won in a landslide. That's unequivocal when you look at all the evidence that's been presented. But to fight for how this election is trying to be stolen mm-hmm. by the deep state and the people behind the deep state. And in fact, there's something your mom and my mom had in common. They were visionaries. And my mom had talked to me about there's going to be a large fight for your country's freedom in your lifetime, Dave. But your mom saw the same thing. Mm-hmm. In my conversations with your brothers and sisters, they said when you were elevated or promoted to the rank of general, they were incredibly proud of you, still are, on that accomplishment. And they were bragging to your mom about Mike becoming a general and how this is so phenomenal for your life and so important in all the time and effort and struggles you had to get there and how incredibly, and that it was kind of like the promised land that, okay, all is going to be good now.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you something she said to them. Bragging about this is fine. But understand something. By Mike getting to this level, he is being put in danger. Mike is going to face the most dangerous situation our country is going to go through in its history. End quote. Helen Flynn.
Mm.
The day you were promoted to general.
Yeah. Well, how? I remember sitting where I'm at right now, not too far. I mean, literally over a couple of yards over one day with my mom, right the summer before she died, and we had a great conversation. She was always, I mean, her mind was so powerful right to the end,
Mm-hmm.
and her body just gave out. One of the things that we always talked about was our children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, my children, my grandchildren, and I've said this before to others, and I'll share it with you all and your audience. When I people ask you, they say about seeing into the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having a vision of the future or what you want the vision to be certainly is important, because you think about how you want your future to be, right? I mean, mm-hmm. Sometimes you can't plan from one day to the next, but you want to think about your life. People plan their lives, they plan their marriages, they plan their finances, all that kind of stuff. How many kids they're going to have. One of the things my mom and I spoke about was that we had a conversation about her life, which spanned, almost 100 years, right? I mean, mm-hmm. Certainly most of the last century, and she died in 2014. And so when she talks about her life and all the experiences that she had, because her father was over a 40-year naval, he was a chief master at arms at Pearl Harbor at one time. Mm. He was a torpedo man during World War I. He was in World War I, and he was a torpedo man in World War II. And he ended up retiring. I mean, literally, he had like I think 41 year career, and he's buried in Arlington Cemetery right now. So my mother had this amazing journey of a life, and then she, of course, gets married, as I talked about, to my father, who's a World War II Korea, mm-hmm. and then she experiences, she has all these children, and we go through Vietnam, and we have, brothers or sisters or brothers-in-law who are in various parts of the military right now. I still have, a brother serving. I still have nephews serving. So it's not just about service to our military, but my mother's view of the world. And she would share that nearly century-long view. And she would say, what you need to understand is that in the coming century, mm-hmm. okay, in this century that we're in now, Dave, that you can actually see certain trends and certain things that will happen in the next 100 years. Mm-hmm. And she would say to me, you need to look at it through the eyes of your grandchildren. Mm. So at the time, we had my granddaughter, who was my youngest, and then of course my son Michael had a grandson. So she would tell me that my granddaughter, by the time that this century that we're in now turns, mm-hmm. okay, mm-hmm. she'll be actually younger than my mother was when my mother died. Mm. So when you begin to see what you think is going to occur, and you understand the components of history, mm-hmm. you understand the components of our own, both U.S. and world adaptations and changes over the millennials, and you start to put into perspective where things go, you know that in order to sustain what we have, in order to, what I like to say is, in order to continue to breathe the fresh air of liberty, mm-hmm. we must protect that fresh air. And we do it not because we do it for ourselves. We mm-hmm. do it because we see a future that we want our children, our grandchildren, to be able to have. I can't see more than through my granddaughter's eyes.
Right.
Okay. I can't see through as I look at what she will be in her life. But I can understand the trends that I know that we're going to face in the coming decades if we don't continue to get this constitutional republic and this experiment in democracy, if we don't continue to fight for it. And I think that we're in this political struggle right now, and this is real. This is very, very real. And so if I fight, what I should have done is I take the pardon and go to the beach, right, and stop.
Well, that's not you.
It's not something that I.
It's not you.
And it's and my wife hits me over the head every so often about it, but if all of us as American citizens, we love what we have. We really do love what we have. We don't want to give it up. So I try to see things through my children and my grandchildren, not through me.
Right. General Flynn, you mentioned the pardon. Again, one of the reasons why I believe people are fighting so hard right now on the front lines. We see it in these hearings. Mm-hmm. People putting their lives on the line. Rudy Giuliani has thousands of people who've signed affidavits under oath about the fraudulent nature of this election. I believe is because of watching what you went through. You went through a 4-year, still, actually, it's still going on. It'll always go on.
Yeah.
4-year persecution, not prosecution. Your pardon that was issued by President Trump was unique. It was a pardon of innocence. It was a part. My mom was a history teacher. She taught me how to dig archives. I've been digging archives since that was issued on November 25th, 2020. I'm not aware of another pardon of innocence. Yours is very unique. And what is just, it's...
Well, let me help you, Dave. Let me help you, because You're right. And in that statement from the White House and from the President of the United States, he basically said, no American citizen should ever be treated like this by his or her own government.
Right.
Ever.
Yes.
Ever.
Yes.
And that is very real. And again, it's like you'd think that I was a mass murderer or something. When you look at what we know happened to me, and like I say, and I tell people this, Dave, and this is really important for I think everybody that hears this. People come to me and say, geez, Mike, we're so sorry that this happened to you. And I tell them, don't feel sorry for me, because I'm not one to feel sorry for myself.
No, you're not.
Feel sorry for the president of this country, for President Donald Trump. Feel sorry for the presidency of our nation, and feel sorry for our country.
Yeah.
Because it's not only an embarrassment for what happened and what we've learned as a nation about what happened, it usurps the entire fabric, and it actually tries to rip the fabric right out of it tries to rip the cell structure, Dr. Dave. It tries to rip the cell structure right out of the DNA of the American body.
It does.
And that's not healthy for a democracy. It's not healthy for a constitutional republic. And we cannot stand for it. And so we have to figure out, gets back to what I said, talking about a million-piece puzzle. People in this country, if somebody comes up and says, I'm sorry I did this, and is genuinely sorry about whatever they did, the American public is one of the most forgiving bodies in the world.
Yes.
When it comes to that.
True.
It is.
True.
But when its own government institution doesn't act in that way and doesn't show accountability for itself, the American public will be unforgiving. And there's little confidence in our Washington, D.C. institutions right now.
Well, the American public doesn't trust the legal judicial court system right now. Just look at this. When your pardon was issued, pardon of innocence was issued, it was 316 days from the day you withdrew your plea.
Mm-hmm.
It was 202 days since the Department of Justice dropped all charges. 202. It was 57 days when it was issued from the last time you had had a hearing. This is so off the charts. And this is what, and by watching what you went through, your family went through, what Sidney Powell was doing and bringing forth, this is one of the motivators of our country. General Flynn, in your statement that you issued, just a quick couple statements. It's a beautiful statement. Everyone should read it. I did a special segment on my radio show about it. It's that moving and inspirational. But here's what, to all Americans, what we choose to do in this life should never be stopped by fear. Instead, we need to embrace the uncertainty and accept the risk that comes with sacrifice, of which you are the embodiment of in your family, and then work to overcome the sheer magnitude of life's challenges, especially during this crucible of our nation's history. Our very survival as a nation is at stake. And it is right now, General Flynn. That is not an overstatement with this stealing of the election. And one of the frustrating things that I have and every American has is that we see you fighting. We see Sidney Powell fighting. We see Rudy Giuliani fighting. We see Lynn Wood fighting. We see all these people fighting. And we see Donald Trump fighting. But the other people that should be fighting were in the foxhole, and they're running the other way.
Yeah.
And one of the most, I posted what I believe is one of the most important documents on this election stealing by an analyst. This guy has more degrees after his name than you and I could count. This Dr. Naya, who Sidney Powell has listed and has utilized as one of her experts in these mother of all bomb legal proceedings she started in Georgia and Michigan, right here outside the window in Michigan. And he came to some conclusions. Can I run them by you very quickly and see if you agree or disagree? Because this fella is a BA, an MA, a PhD, and several things. He worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency, Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, Department of Homeland Security. He is the cyber warfare expert of our country, Dr. Naya.
Yeah, of our time.
Right? And the bought-off lamestream fake media, they won't touch this guy. They won't talk about his findings. But I want to put it on the public record. Here is what he said about his analysis of this entire cyber warfare situation where the election was stolen from Donald Trump, or attempted to be stolen. This is what he says. Conclusions. The Dominion, ESES, Sitel, Smartmatic software systems, voting systems, are all vulnerable to fraud and vote manipulation, and the mainstream media reported on these vulnerabilities in the past but refused to address it now. Dominion has been used in other countries to forge election results. You disagree with any of this so far?
None. I totally agree with what he's saying.
Dominion's corporate structure is deliberately confusing to hide relationships with Venezuela, China, and Cuba. Algorithm programs that were utilized through Hammer and Scorecard are real and not a hoax like the media tends to talk about, and are both used to manipulate election outcomes. Dominion machines are easily hackable. Wow, you listen to the bought-off lamestream fake media? Oh, no, they're not. Dominion memory cards with cryptographic keys to access the systems were stolen in 2019. The counts in disputed states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, show electronic manipulation. The simultaneous decision in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and Michigan to pretend to halt counting votes was unprecedented and demonstrated a coordinated effort to collude toward desired results. 1 or 2% of votes were forged in Biden's favor. Optical scanners were set to accept unverified, unvalidated ballots. The scanners failed to keep records for audits, an outcome that must have been deliberately programmed. The stolen cryptographic keys, which applied to all voting systems, were used to alter vote counts. Favorable votes pouring in after hours for Biden could not be accounted for by Democrat preference by mailed-in ballots. They demonstrated manipulation. In Pennsylvania, it was physically impossible to feed 400,000 ballots in the machine within 2 to 3 hours. Dominion used Chinese parts, and there's reason to believe that China, Venezuela, Cuba interfered in the election. There was a Hammer scorecard cyber attack that altered votes in the battleground states and then forwarded to results to Seitel servers in Frankfurt, Germany to avoid detection. The systems failed to produce audible results. Based on the above findings, Naya, this is under penalty of perjury, sworn affidavit, concluded, quote, with high confidence that the election 2020 data were altered in all battleground states, resulting in hundreds of thousands of votes that were cast for President Trump to be transferred to Vice President Biden, end quote. General Flynn, do you have an issue with any of those conclusions?
None. And I'm glad you mentioned that he signed that under penalty of perjury. So, I mean, he's basically laying out his expertise. And then you mentioned it, and I want to bring it up briefly, I hope. These witnesses who have come forward, some of whom are from Dominion or subcontractors that work for them, in across all these hearings that Rudy Giuliani's team has been having. And I think it was up in the Michigan hearing, the woman who was a subcontractor or a contractor for Dominion, and she was terrific. She was a great witness.
She was,
and she was treated she was treated terribly by the panels, both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yes,
I mean, as though she was some dummy up there. She under penalty of perjury, and I love what she said to one of the senators there. But she lost her job.
Right.
She's a mother of 2 children. Mm-hmm. She had to move. Mm-hmm. She had to change her phone number. Mm-hmm. She's been threatened. Mm-hmm. The number of witnesses that are coming forward, not just about Dominion, but about mail fraud in general, are being threatened right now. I mean, threatened to the point of having their homes broken into, all the kinds of things that you have. Last thing on witnesses, because these witnesses are patriots.
They are.
You have a gentleman, I think he's up in Michigan. I won't get into the truck drivers in Pennsylvania that drove, ballots across state lines and drove them in. That's an incredible, horrendous commitment of fraud, not by the truck driver.
No.
But by someone who directed that.
That's right.
Postal Service, elements of the Postal Service are probably involved. But this gentleman up in Michigan, he kind of looks like Santa Claus, I mean, I hate to describe him like that, but when he was talking, and he was so passionate, and he actually got emotional in his presentation, in his witness to the legislature, and he said, "Look, we're not going to accept this if we keep going down this road.
Right.
We have to stop, and we have to relook all this stuff, and we have to do it in a bipartisan, fair, honest, very specific way, both technically and in the mail-in ballots, the sort of the paper ballot side of it, right? Mm-hmm. And if we don't do that, and he was talking to Mr. Biden, he was talking to the president. If we don't do that, there's the people of this country, and certainly I think through him, he represented not just Michigan, he represented tens of millions of people in this country. And I found his testimony, his witness, extraordinary. And I would give that guy a giant hug if I ever physically saw him and ran into him, because to me, he's the town crier of old.
He is. Right? I agree.
In the right outside of the Lexington Common, he's out there saying, to the men that stood the Lexington Common to slow the British attack down before it went to the Battle of Concord, where the first shot was heard round the world. I mean, that individual was standing out there, telling we have to form up, men. Bring whatever you can. We have to slow the British coming down the trail from Boston. Mm-hmm. That guy is kind of like that type of person at that moment. And so now we have another historic moment, and it's because of all the technology that we have. It's coming out live and in full color, right?
Right.
So anyway, I'll stop there, because there's so much witness testimony that has come out, and they are all under penalty of perjury. And it's not 10 people, it's not one person, it's thousands.
It is.
In multiple states that are just sick of what they're seeing, and it's unacceptable, and we can't have it.
So General Flynn is the people's general. There are many people, patriots, that are not defeated, but tired. They have been relentlessly propagandized that, well, it's all over. There's nothing more that can be done in this fight. I don't believe that's the case. I know you don't either. What should every one of our listeners, viewers, and every American that is dedicated to freedom and liberty and the future of this country, what do they need to do at this point?
Well, I mean, I would say right now, people need to sort of rally to their state's capitals. And they need to be out there, I mean, across the country, and find those local leaders who have the strength to organize and to bring people together and go put demands on our governors and our secretaries of state, certainly because of their election responsibilities, but definitely the state's legislatures that we have. I mean, this has got to happen because there's this drumbeat, there's this drumbeat that's going on right now in these legal cases, and there's so many defenders, not of us, the defenders of this fraud that happened, and you're saying to yourself, I mean, there's legions of defenders doing this. Why would anybody want to not have transparency and truth? And you have these plaintiffs in these cases, like a Sidney Powell, like a Lynn Wood, like a Rudy Giuliani, who's fighting not just for the president. In Rudy Giuliani's case, he's fighting for the president. Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood, they're fighting for the people of this country. Their client is the American public. So these people have to get out there and join these rallies, and they have to go put demands and say, we have got to, sort of recycle what we just witnessed in our election. We can't accept it, and we have to, let's fix it. Let's fix it. Let's make it right. Let's make it right. I understand there's at least 75 legislatures in the state legislature in Pennsylvania who are basically over the last 24 hours, it's like, they're starting to sort of, there's an argument going on in Pennsylvania. So that's one of the things. We have to put demands on the local politicians because we vote for them.
That's right. One
person, one vote. Your vote, Dave, is equal to my vote in the past. My vote is equal to, the richest person in the world who votes in this country and the poorest person in the world who goes and votes for this country. We're equal in that respect, in that privilege that millions have sacrificed their very lives for. And I'll finish with this because I know we're going to run out of time. I spoke to a senior legislative member of the Pennsylvania Senate the other day, and I reminded him that, from what I understand, there are more dead voters in this last election that voted in Pennsylvania than are buried on the hallowed grounds of Gettysburg Battlefield. Think about that for a second. So, despite what you thought about the North or the South, those people that are buried there sacrificed their lives for just an incredible belief in something that needed to be done. Thank God for them. Thank God for them. And those others who are buried in Arlington and other national memorial cemeteries around the country. It is through their sacrifice that we have this fresh air of liberty that we need to have in order to maintain the oxygen and the lifeblood of this country. And so the people that are alive and still kicking, they need to get out there and sort of charge to the sounds of the rallies and put demands on the legislatures that we have, because we can't have this in our country. And all this nonsense, and I keep saying I'll stop, but all this nonsense about runoff elections they're not going to happen in the way that, why would we want to have a runoff election with the same system that we have?
That's crazy. It's the definition of insanity. It's insanity.
Yeah. So anyway, I give. You got me.
Well, General Flynn, I'd like to thank you. You've been very generous with your time. I'd like to thank you on behalf of tens of millions of Americans. I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you for everything you have done, everything you are doing, and everything you will do. And I want to close this by a quote from Helen Flynn. Here's to those that love us well, and those that don't can go to hell.
I knew the end of that one.
And as my dad used to say, his favorite saying, dream big and dare to fail.
That's right.
And I use it when I was a little kid. I said, Dad, wait, you mean dare to win? He goes, no, Dave. If you dare to win, you'll leave about 90% of the field.
Yeah.
If you dare to fail, you'll leave 110% of the field.
Right.
And you, sir, are the epitome of dreaming big and daring to fail. And I thank you for your perseverance, your dedication, and your sacrifice.
Well, God bless you, Dave, and thank you for your incredible support. I mean, from day one. And God bless America, and thanks for having me on your show. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And folks, thank you for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.